Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Turk from Greeley PD in Colorado. He has 28 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Turk. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Paige. I'm honored and very excited to be here.
I am too. We had a conversation offline, and I feel like we could probably talk for a few hours about wellness. And, I feel like we're on the same page with a lot of things. So I'm really excited to share your perspective and some of the things that you're doing organizationally. Can you start with a little bit of background for anyone who doesn't know who you are? What have the last 28 years looked like for you? And give us a little bit of background. Who are you?
Yeah, thanks. So my name's Adam Turk. I was born and raised outside of New York City, and I had some family out here in Colorado. So in 1992, I came out here to go to college with the intention of returning back to New York City to work after I graduated. And when I got done with college, I went to the police academy, got hired on with the Evans Police Department, which is a smaller community just to the south of Greeley, and spent 3 years there. Then I came over to the Greeley Police Department to experience more of what policing had to offer in terms of promotability, different assignments. I really wanted to be a detective and never really thought about promotion. But right when I came over to Greeley is when I met my wife at the hospital. And so, in addition to being a police chief and a police officer, I am a busy father of two energetic boys and the husband of an incredible woman who's a nurse down at Denver Health.
I really appreciate that you shared a little bit about who you are outside of your career. And, I was thinking this a little while ago that so often we default to what we do. And so I really appreciate you, peeling back the layers a little bit and sharing a little bit on the personal side, your family and your kids. Because when we talk about wellness, I think it's important for us to understand that there's a whole other side of the coin. You have your professional life, but you also are a human behind everything.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's something I wish I could tell a younger Adam Turk,
Mm.
now that I have all this wisdom and years of experience on how I might have done things a little differently as a younger officer.
I think that we all have those moments. I think I shared with you offline that the goal when I first started this podcast is to, inspire and educate the younger generation so, they can get to the end of their career with maybe fewer of those I wish or, I could have done things differently. But I think ultimately we're all going to get to the end of this thing and look back, and hindsight's 2020, of like, man, I could have done this better. And I definitely have those too, where I'm like, man, I think when we're young, at least for me and my perspective, I was so focused on advancement and being the best, doing the best. And I thought that it was an either or. I thought that I couldn't have both. I couldn't be successful in my personal life and my professional life, that I had to pour every last ounce of who I was into what I did. And I think now looking back, I could have had both. I wouldn't say that it would be a perfect balance, but I think that I could have prioritized my personal life more, and I definitely should have.
I think we all could say that. We
Mm.
all should say that. And work-life balance is one of those terms you're hearing in public safety right now on how to have a more balanced professional and personal life. I have very few regrets in my career, but there are some things I would have done differently. Maybe I'd still have a full head of hair had I done those things.
100%. I always say I'm like I have a lot more grays now than I used to. So I know that one of your number one priorities is mental health. And so I want to talk about this a little bit and why that is such a priority to you, and maybe some of the things that you've seen throughout your career that have made it a priority.
Yeah, so as an officer, as a sergeant, and as a commander and deputy chief, I was always a part of our peer support team, which was in its infancy, somewhat new, not just to the Greeley Police Department, but to law enforcement. And every year we worked on how we could make it better advertised, more available, more diverse. So when I became the police chief in 2021, the city manager, the city council, and through a lot of reflection, I sat down and said, what are our priorities in 2021? but what do we want the department to look like in 5, 10, 15 years when it comes to our human capital, which is our employees, the most important, the reason that we come to work, the reason we do what we do. And of those top three priorities, employee mental health was one of them. And so I charged our command staff to help me to research, go to schools, read as much as we can on things that we're doing well, but gaps and things that we could do better. And there's always things that we can do better, no matter how robust I think our mental health and wellness program for our officers is. We could always do something better. So I challenged everyone, including myself, on what we could do better. And in looking back, I think we've accomplished a lot in 4 years, but I know there's more that we can do moving forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that you said that the most important is the people. Um, we get so caught up sometimes in conversations. I hear this a lot where everyone's like, "Well, what's the ROI? You know, how do we get our investment back? What's the return on investment?" And ultimately, like my answer to this is always it's the people. Like that's the ROI is that your people are thriving. You know, how do you get there? And I think that that strategy of kind of zooming out and looking at short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals is really effective. And you can apply this obviously as an organization, which sounds like that's what you did. I think we can also apply that as individuals. If we take those moments of reflection to step back a little bit and say, okay, what do I want in the short term? What do I want in the midterm? And then what does the long term look like? And how can we work backwards from that to create the steps today for a better future? And I think that we get so inundated in the grind in the day to day of what's going on that sometimes we lose sight of the future and that proactiveness that needs to happen so that our future selves can be happy or happier. I hate to say happy,
Yeah,
but happier.
yeah, happier. And we were talking offline beforehand, but about what my day looks like, and it's
Mm,
different every day. Leadership is all about people. It's 95% listening, and no day is the same, which is refreshing and what I enjoy, why I enjoy coming to work every day. But I would say most of my day is dealing with people
mm,
and listening to them and hearing about their family, their kids, things that are going well. Because really, if we don't have those relationships at some kind of a level, how do we really identify when people are struggling, what that root cause may be? So, a large portion of my day is spent with people, and typically are younger people.
yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because, I think that again, like when you're so inundated in the grind, if you're not paying attention, you miss things, right? And so by having those relationships and those conversations, you start to understand when something's off. And I love that you use the word root cause because sometimes we see behavioral things and we're really quick to judge. And we talked a little bit about this offline too, of like how we kind of, see people in the space of peer-to-peer judgment or looking at people and maybe not understanding the why beneath why things are happening, and there usually always is some sort of root cause. And I can use maybe a very simple example. If you see someone who starts maybe drinking more, and you start to see this behavioral change in them, why is that happening? Because we know that turning to drinking is an unhealthy coping mechanism for something that's deeper, right? It's an escapism type behavior. So I really appreciate that you said, hey, I try to pay attention so that I can spot those flags. And then we can have those conversations of what is causing it. And then how can we have solution-based conversations and put in place resources that are going to help to, resolve whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah, and that's not just the responsibility of the police chief or the deputy chiefs. That's really everyone that is in a leadership position, from our sergeants to our commanders. Know your people. Know something about each one of your people so that when performance dips, performance changes, there's something going on. And there's that delicate balance of prying into someone's life versus holding people accountable while they're at work. But there's also a human element of police leadership, and knowing your people is probably the best way to accomplish that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you because I was having this kind of thought process the other day of How much responsibility do you think wellness is for leadership, and how much of the responsibility falls on the individual?
That's a really interesting question because I've been reading studies. Our local university just did a mental health study in law enforcement that's in the process of being published.
Mm,
And there is a large segment of that study that attributes mental health to leadership, problems with mental health directly to leadership, but then there's also some personal accountability. And I know there's a mixture. I can't tell you quantitatively from the studies that I've read or the articles that I've read. I know that leadership, command staff does impact employee mental health. I'm not naive to think that it doesn't. But there's also some accountability that needs to be taken by employees to reach out to peer support, to friends, doesn't have to be a supervisor. So I don't know what that, percentage ratio is, but there's definitely a mixture. And I feel bad hearing that because as a police chief, I don't come to work hoping to disrupt people's lives, personally and professionally. We don't sit around and look at new policies and think about how this may impact someone's mental health or their job satisfaction or their happiness. But after reading a lot of this information, it's something we should keep in the back of our minds. How we implement change, the speed at which we do it. I say this often, but there's two things that cops hate, and that's change and the way things are.
right.
What I've come to learn in 28 years is change is inevitable
Mm,
with technology and the reason we provide public safety is for our residents that live in our communities and politics. Um, but we need to think about those things.
yeah. I agree with you. I think that it's a partnership, and I spent a lot of my life, I think a lot of my perspective today is based on things that I didn't do very well in my past. It's this kind of self-assessment of like, oh, I could have done that better. And so it's, I think, a learned and lived experience sometimes. But I think as I get older and as I'm kind of in this wellness space more, I start to understand my role in things. And I think it's really easy for us to point our fingers outside of ourselves. And a lot of those things might be really valid. Maybe someone who's listening does work for an organization where leadership is not supportive of wellness, or maybe there's some sort of broken culture or something that's happening organizationally. Those things can be true, but where is that self accountability? What are you going to do about it? How are you going to take care of yourself? Because if other people aren't going to take care of you, it's your responsibility to take care of you, and your family, your friends, your community are relying on that for you to be good. And so I think I've learned a lot of spending my time kind of blaming other people or pointing my fingers at other people. And maybe it was really valid, but I've now taken a lot of time to kind of understand I can only control me. I can't control a lot of things that happen throughout the day, but I can control my actions and my reactions to things. I can control if I take care of myself physically, mentally, nutritionally. I can control how I respond to a situation. I can have emotional regulation through the turbulence. And so I agree with you that it's a partnership. And the best case scenario is that you have a spectacular culture and a command staff that's really supportive, and, everyone loves each other. But in the event that maybe that isn't the case, how can you take responsibility of your own wellness?
Yeah, I use that kind of for morale when you know, certain times throughout my career, I've heard that morale is at an all-time low. Morale is really good. I found that morale is really good usually after raises come through. Um, but when morale is bad, yeah, there's some things in the culture of accountability that we live in that we can help provide in terms of resources, accessibility, mental health, equipment, technology, but there also is a personal accountability for morale.
Mm.
Some people need to be responsible for their own morale and changes that they need to make to be happier at work, which hopefully leads to being happier at home.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's also a really interesting point that I thought of when you were talking is that there are a lot of agencies that also do provide a lot of things, and then people don't take advantage of it. So, there might be a situation where you do have it all. Are you taking advantage of those things? Because that's on you too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to be the police chief in Greeley, as the position became available in 2020 to 2021, it was a tough time in policing, post George Floyd, post COVID. But I knew that if I were to be appointed, I'd be the luckiest person ever because as a large city in Colorado, we have incredible support services, um, financial resources, technology, training that a lot of departments don't have. So though we like to get caught up in the minutia of what we don't have or what could be better, sometimes it's good to look at the glass half full and say, we are very fortunate
Mhm.
for where we work in a supportive community with a department that has good salaries, good benefits, but unbelievable resources
Mhm.
and availability of cover officers and backup. So that is not lost on me, and I am very grateful not just to be the police chief of an incredible organization filled with men and women, but that we're well resourced.
I think gratitude is one of the most underutilized resources and training that we can implement into our lives. And I know I'm aware that there's some words that I still think create eye rolls. Like sometimes I think it's maybe a little bit woo-woo. So I'm really grateful that you said that word because it is so much easier to look at negatives. Our brains are wired to look for danger, to look for the negative. We are hardwired to look for the bad in things. And I think especially in your career, like your job is to look for those things, right? To look for things that maybe didn't go very well. Um, we have to retrain our brain to look for the positive. And I had another chief on the podcast and he had an acronym for it. And I always laugh because you guys like love acronyms and
Love it.
I try to keep up with everything. But he called it PMA and it was positive mental attitude. And he said that he tries to start his day every day with a positive mental attitude. And I think that it's one of the biggest underutilized things that we can do for ourselves every day. And it takes 2 seconds. It literally takes less than 10 seconds for you to say, I'm grateful for these three things. And then try to repeat that throughout the day because there's always going to be negative and it's really easy to look for it. But how can we retrain our brain to look for the good things?
Yeah, and we're our own worst critics. We love to brief, debrief, and go over the things that didn't go right. Very rarely do we sit around after a high liability or a critical incident and talk about all the amazing things that happened.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping this is a part of our culture. But as I go down to roll calls, briefings where the officers kind of start their day, I am jealous of our leadership at the sergeant rank because the positivity that they are bringing to their briefings, which I think sets the tone for the officer's entire 10-hour shift. So instead of hearing all the negative things that happened either the day before or with their work product or think just negative things going on and then starting their day off that way at a briefing, I love their positive energy that they're giving. So we love acronyms. Whoever came up with PMA, I'll probably steal that too.
I love the positivity in briefings. I think that that's so cool. It's actually the first time I've ever heard that. Um, yeah, it's a choice. It's a choice on how you show up and how you want to present yourself. And I think that we have to celebrate the wins. I actually had someone, and I don't know who's doing this, but it was some sort of technology that's coming out where they are able to flag body cam video footage. And they're flagging like certain types of calls or flagging certain types of language, but it wasn't just the bad stuff. They were flagging like certain behaviors that were positive and then sending that to command staff so that there could be positive reinforcement because we know, and always try to relate this to something really simple, but let's say you're in a relationship. I know you're married, happily married. There's a lot of people who listen to this podcast, I'm sure, have at least been in a relationship at some point in their life. If you are in a relationship with somebody and all they do is highlight the bad stuff day to day, it wears you down. If you're just always being like, you didn't do this, you didn't take out the trash, you didn't do that, like it's wearing on you. People need to feel like they're doing a good job. People need to feel like they're valued. And so I think that there's a shift where I'm starting to hear a lot of this, where it's how can we celebrate the wins? How can we make sure that people are recognized for their good work? How can we make sure that they feel valued? Yes, you need to address the things that maybe didn't go very well, but how can we equally highlight the things that did go well?
Yeah. And that lends to our comments about positivity and how do we focus on the good things that happened, which is why I'm very proud of our department's awards committee. And we give a lot of recognition, whether it be a written recognition, an actual award, or a bar they can wear in their uniform. And we celebrate that annually with a nice dinner where they can bring their family members. But it's those little things that don't necessarily need to be formally recognized. Whether it's a good interaction, we'll get pictures sent to us of an officer changing a tire. And our officers don't have an obligation to do roadside maintenance or change tires, but it's those little things where they're finding a way to help. We'll get those sent to us. I find more value and positivity in hearing about those things, um, just as I do on the stressful incidents that end in a good resolution, and we reward them with actions that they took, split second decisions. But it's also those little things, and I think they like to hear that also. They
Yeah.
like to be recognized for that.
I think everyone can relate to that. I mean, you never know what people are going through. I've had some of my hardest days where someone just says one like little nice things. Sometimes it's just like the person at Starbucks that like gives me a compliment and it's like all I need to get through the rest of that day. And so I think that we can all do a better job, right? We can all look at the people around us, whether that's professionally or personally, and really try to say something kind or say something nice because we never know what they're going through. And maybe they're having a really hard day or a hard month or a hard year. And it's that one thing that you say that keeps them going. So I think that we all can take responsibility for something like that. I do want to highlight some of the other things you guys are doing. I know you mentioned that you have a lot of resources you're really proud of. So are you able to maybe highlight a handful that have been really successful for you guys?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we have when it comes to employee mental health is our peer support program.
Mm.
And again, we're fortunate to have the resources and the amount of people to choose from on who's on this diverse team. But what I find value and what I'm proud of our team about is the fact that they are officers from all different assignments, different tenures, levels of experience, critical incidents they've been in, those that have not been in. We have several members that are on our peer support team that are on our SWAT team, and that kind of breaks down the stigma, the machismo. Hey, you can be a SWAT officer, but you can also be a peer support officer. And I've taken tremendous value of hearing from those experienced officers who have been around, been in critical incidents, yet they're also human beings that have a family and have a life outside of law enforcement. So they're the first ones to listen. So when I look at our peer support team, I think one of the things where we're different than other departments is the diversity
Mm.
and the different assignments that our team belong to. And when we're still working on the stigma of psychologists, mental health, but we were fortunate. Our team applied for and got some really nice grants that helped with funding to supplement the resources that are already provided by the city of Greeley and the police department. So we opened up our department psychologist because sometimes cops think that they can't talk to someone from EAP. They need to be police specific.
Right.
So at first, a couple years ago, we opened up our access to our department psychologists and all their clinicians to 3 times a year for anything going on in your life. Does not need to be work related, does not need to be a critical incident. It could be anything. And then in the last year, we evaluated it and we had to see how much it was being utilized, how much not, where kind of the financial resources landed. And in this past year, we opened it up to unlimited sessions a year with our department psychologist, which is in addition to the city benefit of EAP, our voluntary wellness check-ins. So give as much as we can, offer as much as we can, and hope that they utilize it.
Yeah. I really like that. It seems to me like you have this mentality of like, how can we continue to build these resources so that people know that they're supported? You know, it's not a destination, it's a continuous evolution of resources. You said stigma, and I really want to bring this up because we were talking a little bit offline about, how do we break stigma? And I think what did you say to me? You said if we had the solution to
If
that.
we had the answer, we could tour the country and market it,
Yeah.
because everyone would buy it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's not just policing. That's probably in the fire departments and in public safety overall. But breaking that down and telling our people, our human capital, that it's okay to ask for help without any consequences or repercussions. I would love for that to be the case. I just know that it's not. As much as we continue to try to break it down, we need to keep working at it.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been in this wellness space for almost 9 years now, and I have seen an evolution of wellness over time. I remember 9 years ago out here in the Phoenix area, someone walking up to me and they're like, cops don't do this. They're like, this will never be a part of our culture. And at that time, I was volunteering, and they were like, if you want to do it for free, like, sure, we won't say no, but like, just so you know, this is not going to be a thing. And now, fast forward 9 years, we're sitting on a podcast and we're talking about how important wellness and mental health really is. And so I do think that there have been strides in that direction. I agree with you. I think that there's still a ways to go. I'm interested to see what the next maybe 5, 10 years looks like as we start to see kind of the changing of guards, if you will, of, individuals who grew up in this career where it was highly stigmatized and it was not okay to talk about it. And now the younger generation coming in where it's totally normal and it's something that they've already like always have had. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time. What I'm seeing, and I know I mentioned this to you earlier, but a lot of the agencies that I talk to, we're seeing a huge support of wellness from command staff. Agencies are redeveloping what their training looks like, what their resources look like. Command staff leadership are on board with wellness. I'm seeing a lot of the stigma coming from peer to peer. I don't know if you have any insights on that, but I'm seeing more of the stigma, not from the leadership perspective, but from peer to peer.
Yeah, and I can speak to 28 years of institutional knowledge. Adam Turk, the police officer, the young police officer with a full head of hair back in 1996, I wouldn't have dare asked for help. And I don't think it would have gone over well with the senior officers there. It was, hey, we don't do that.
Mm.
This is what you signed up to do. This is what you get paid to do. Um, and I would have been labeled. And to see where we are today in 2025 versus where we were when I started, it's leaps and bounds. It's not even comparable.
Yeah.
And I don't take responsibility for it. I'm glad to be a part of that change. But yeah, I think the shift to your point, what we're seeing is more of the peer-to-peer labeling, stigma, rumors with support from command staff to get the help that you need. I would love to stop any more stories or rumors from ever happening again.
Yeah.
Again, we could probably tour the country if we knew how to stop that also.
Yeah, I think, and obviously I'm an outsider looking in. My hope is that one day there could be this team mentality of like, we genuinely want everyone to win and to succeed. I don't know if there's ever going to be a perfect solution for that. We talked about earlier, we're dealing with people and people are nuanced, and there's always going to be, ups and downs and good stuff and bad stuff with, human beings. But, I think that if we can all enter into any situation with empathy and with the desire to be a part of a team that is successful. And that means lifting people up, not dragging people down. I think that we would all be in a better place if we could do that. I'm a really big fan of solution-based conversations. So, what do you think, if you could envision like the future, what do you think it's going to take to break down that stigma?
First of all, my mantra, and I finish every conversation when I have meetings, is please don't bring me problems, bring me solutions.
Mm,
Because I don't have all the answers and I never will. And most of the solutions and good ideas come from our workforce, from
right.
our people. I think we've made such tremendous strides. We need to keep talking about it, not just at the local level, the state level, the national level, but I can't speak for Arizona, but Colorado is very supportive when it comes to mental health. And whether that's through appropriations of state dollars, more municipal dollars, we need to keep putting the emphasis on our human capital and how do we get our return on investment to be longer so people can have 15, 20, 30-year careers. So keep having the conversation. Practice makes perfect. You only get better if you practice something over and over. So every conversation, every supervisor meeting we have, we dedicate a part to what we're doing good, bad, and different, what we can do better as an agency when it comes to mental health. Um, be, because our supervisors are our employees also. So what can we do for them?
Yeah.
So I do think it's going to continue to get better. I think organizations similar to the city of Greeley are recognizing it as their entire workforce, as something they need to dedicate more resources to as a benefit. So I do think it's going to get it, but we have to keep talking about it at the chief level, at the line level. Um, IACP nationally. I know a lot of the sessions at the IACP conference, at our Colorado Chiefs of Police conference, we talk about employee mental health and wellness. How can we eat better, exercise more? Keep having those. I do think it's going to get better.
Yeah, I agree. And I say this all the time, and maybe it sounds cheesy, but I really believe it to be true. I always say that conversations save lives. I think the more that not only can there be awareness and education about things, I think that it's also our responsibility to share things about ourselves. There has to be a certain level of vulnerability and authenticity that comes with that. And again, I've had to learn this over time. It wasn't something I was really comfortable with in the beginning, but I've learned that if you have gone through hard things and if you have used resources that have helped you, or if the organization has provided resources that have helped you, talk about it. How can we share those things with other people so that they know that it's safe, that they know that it's normal, and they also take action for themselves? Because I really do, and I've said this before, but I do think that there's three steps to forward momentum, to forward progress, and it's awareness, education, and action. You have to have awareness around a challenge. You have to have education as to what kind of resources are going to help. And then at the end of the day, we have to be able to implement those things, whether that's organizationally, you go to ISCP and you talk about all this stuff, but then how do you put that into action so that it actually helps people? From a personal perspective, same thing. We can talk about stuff all day, we can educate ourselves all day, but at the end of the day, we have to do something about it, right? And so if someone is listening now and you have gone through something difficult and you have had resources that have helped, how can you share that with other people? Because conversations do save lives. I really believe that. Someone else is going to hear your story, it's going to resonate, and then they're going to want to follow those same steps to improve themselves.
Yeah, and as part of the studies that I've read, sharing those stories from the leadership level, from the chief level, through the deputy chiefs and the commanders is important
Mm.
because I think we all have examples and stories over the course of our career, and our life outside of policing where we could have done something different, we should have done something different, and that that's our job as the chief, as command staff, is to implement policy and implement those actions that we're talking about rather than just having conversations. And I think we talked a little bit offline about an example I had with a commander that worked here, that was dealing with things, personally, that a lot of people knew about, but nobody wanted to say anything.
Mm.
And it ended tragically, which impacted the organization because he was an incredible leader, incredible person, had been here for a long time. And after the grief stage and the reflection stage, I think I was one of them who looked in the mirror and said, what could we have done differently to help save this person where they might still be alive today? And ignorance is not okay. Um, and those are some, that's just one example of something that I would have done differently or handled differently, um had I known it ended where it did. But hey, here's some resources. Not an intervention, but something that we have available, at the department or with the city, to where we could have gotten this person more resources.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I agree with you. I think that the more conversations we can have around these things and the more awareness, and I know you talked about this earlier, how can you know people and how can you pay attention to those things? And then what are the actions that you can take? I had a conversation recently where someone said the same thing. They said that people don't know what to say, so they don't say anything at all. And there were quite a few people I've talked to who have regretted that, after the fact. And it could be something really small or it could be something really big. But even if you don't know what to say, I
Say
think
something.
say something, yeah, something, or tell somebody, if you don't want to be the person to say it, tell somebody else that can, put in place something to help. So I agree with you and I appreciate you sharing that a lot.
Yeah, thanks. And I think those stories need to come from leadership. It humanizes it, similar to how we try to communicate with our residents in our community about humanizing the badge,
Mm.
letting them know that your guardians are your neighbors, their fathers, their mothers, they're they're contributing to your community. Same thing with humanizing the badge. Like
Yeah.
how do we take care of each other?
Yeah. And I think unfortunately, and at least this has been my experience, that the hardest things that we go through in our lives become the biggest opportunity for us to help other people and to do better. And so taking those things that have happened in our past and trying to identify how we can avoid making that same mistake again and how we can improve ourselves over time. And there has to be that self assessment, right? We have to be able to take a step back. And you said this earlier. I loved the analogy of like look in the mirror, but try to understand what are the things that we did really well? What are the things that we didn't do well? And how can we improve on both? We always want to, even if we did great. I relate this to sports. You see like these professional sports teams, even after you win the Super Bowl, there's one team that wins, right? They do the best. They're still reviewing tape at the end of the day. They celebrate the wins, but then they're also going to take a look at it and say, how can we improve? Because you've never reached a destination. There's always another season, right, that you have to prepare for. And then the same thing for those things that didn't go really well or those mistakes that you feel like you made, how can you learn from that as hard as it is to try to avoid that happening again?
Yeah, cops are we're our own worst critics.
Mm,
Like we were talking about, we love to debrief everything, but really the reason you do it is so that you don't make the same mistakes again.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
said.
Thank you. My final question for you, and then I'll let you kind of take the floor if I missed anything. But for the younger generation, the younger men and women who are entering into this career today, what words of wisdom would you share with them? You know, maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way in your career.
I'm well prepared for this conversation. Um, I feel like in our command staff interviews, before we hire someone, we do a command staff interview where we get to ask some follow-up questions about their background. More and more, I have the applicants or the candidates asking us, the command staff, that same question. What would you tell the younger you, the newer you, differently? So what I tell our younger officers is don't wish your career by. Don't be in such a rush to apply for or seek out training and think, what's my next assignment? What's the next promotion? Enjoy today. I look back over my career and my 6 best years was as an officer on a shift with my best friends that we worked together with. We took care of each other. We responded to calls together, the success of the team, and then we hung out outside of work together. So don't wish your career by. Take everything that you're learning, similar to drinking out of a fire hose, and apply it, but try to enjoy it. Try
Mm,
not to sit there and wonder when the next sergeant's test is going to be announced, when's the next investigations assignment, because I do believe my best years were as a street patrol officer assigned to a shift. Um, and at the same time, as I say that, have balance, have a life outside of law enforcement. Don't lose touch with those friends and contacts you had before you became a police officer, because now you think they don't understand cop talk or the day in a life of a police officer or what you do. They will understand. Most of them want to hear your stories, but it's really nice to have an outlet and a group outside of law enforcement to where you can engage in other activities that don't involve policing.
yeah.
So there's my I could sum up a whole 28 years in that.
I really like the don't wish away your career. Um, it's so interesting because I think when I was younger, I didn't realize how fast time was going to go. I think when I was younger, I really thought I had all the time in the world. And you do that, right? You're looking at what's next and you miss what's happening now. And I have found that the best moments in my life, I only understand that they're the best moments of my life once they're gone because I didn't take the time to really enjoy them and to recognize, sometimes we don't realize, that time in your career in that moment, maybe you didn't realize that you'd be looking back and thinking that that was the best, right? And so I've definitely done that. I agree with you. How can you be more present? How can you enjoy what's happening now? I also have said this to new recruits. I'll work with academies sometimes, and they're always like so excited to graduate. And like, I can't wait to graduate. And I'm like, yes, that is really exciting. And that's something to strive for. And it's a huge accomplishment to graduate, but also try to enjoy this time right now because you're never going to be this new. You're never going to be this young. You're never going to be this excited for something new. You're never going to have these same relationships again because you're all going to have different shifts, or, a lot of the academies out here are regional. So, you might be going to different agencies. So, how can you enjoy this right now? Because this is the only time you're going to have it. You're never going to be in the academy ever again. So, I really, really like those words of advice of, you know, still strive, to be your best. And maybe you do want to promote and maybe you have other goals within the organization, but try to enjoy the moment and what you have right now because you never know when it's going to be the best time of your life.
Yeah, be the best version of yourself that you can, because you don't know when it'll end. And I love my career. I have very, very few regrets. But I know that I'm closer to the end than I am at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I do miss some of those times as an officer, less responsibility, more fun, more laughing.
Yeah, but like we said before too, you might enter into retirement and look back at this time too and be like, wow, that was great. I think different phases of our life teach us different things. And so I'm really excited to connect with you again in the future and see how things are going, as you progress in your role as a chief, but also as you progress into the next chapter of your life. Eventually, not yet,
Yeah, not
but
yet. Well,
eventually.
thank you, Paige. Like I said, I'm
Yeah.
honored and humbled to be invited on to your podcast because this is an important conversation and it's an important topic. And thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if I missed anything else, I'll let you kind of sign off. And if there's anything else that you want to add, go for it.
Yeah, I have a freshman in college and a freshman in high school. So I get another 4 year try at the whole high school. Um, uh, Not to wish it by because I enjoy every moment of it. And I'm really gonna live in the moment over the next 4 years with my high school son and try to live vicariously through him and enjoy everything that he's doing and accomplishing. Um, and that to me is a different professional Adam versus the rookie Adam, where I'm a father and I'm a husband in addition to being a police chief.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for
thank
your
you.
time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.